Welcome to the Advertising Forum. This is episode 2 of our Future is Live series, sponsored by Freewheel.
With us today is Ryan McConville, the Chief Product Officer and EVP Platforms at NBCUniversal. Ryan's joining us today to chat all things live. Ryan, welcome to the Advertising Forum.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm very happy to be with you guys.
Ryan, I've been watching the news closely. Live events are moving rapidly from traditional TV into streaming. Can you talk about the shift, maybe with the Big 12 college basketball coming to Peacock in 2025 and what's happening there?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think we have been seeing this shift for a long time as viewers, opt to consume premium video in the platform of their choice. And, while we're shifting to streaming, we are really following the viewers wherever they're consuming, right? So our live sports still span the gamut between like traditional linear and the streaming platforms. But we think that we have been and will continue to be a leader in shifting more of that consumption into streaming, just because of our prior leadership position in live sports generally and in live broadcasting. So just to kind of give you a scale, because some of these numbers are, I think, kind of shocking. About 70% of NBCU's total programming hours are live content. People think of sports, right, kind of in a silo. But we also have obviously live news that happens all the time, live entertainment in terms of late night and SNL. And so when you look across all of the programming hours, it's about 70%. In 2026, on live events alone, we will have about 40% of all of the big live events in the entire year. So almost half of all the major live events that are happening next year will happen on NBCU properties. That includes what we're calling Legendary February, which has, I think, a nice ring to it, which is a 2-week period, which our ad ops team is really looking forward to, by the way, where the Olympics, the Super Bowl, and the NBA All-Star Weekend are all happening simultaneously. Yeah. During that period of time, we're projected to reach 2 out of 3 people in the United States with all those mega events. So NBCU, I think, is really been in the pole position to take a leadership position in innovating what it looks like to move live events into streaming. And what we're hearing is that, it really does matter to advertisers. Since the advent of streaming, the way that we consume premium video has really changed. Like when I was growing up, and I think ad tech guy, I don't know how old you are, but when you were growing up, probably, Jeremy, maybe when you were, we all sat around the TV and watched the same programs at the same time, right? So people across America were kind of seeing everything simultaneously. In the world of VOD, it's a choose your own adventure world these days, right? So everyone's watching something different. And people watch similar shows, but at all different times. So really live events are the place where this sort of like cultural community consumption is still happening. And that allows advertisers really to achieve instant scale very quickly. So we achieve about 41 million viewers reached every day in an immediate real-time way. That is hard to achieve in VOD and sort of by piecing together VOD. And then from an advertising perspective, what we see are people are really leaned into live events because they are, real-time. So you get 21% on average more engagement in the brand advertising just because of that sort of leaned-in nature of the format. So all that being said, I think the last thing I'll say is you are right that there is a big move into streaming. Peacock in 2026 will have over 7,500 hours of live sports programming that people can look forward to.
Some of those stats are impressive. 70% live, 41 million viewers, 21% more engagement. How has that changed? And how has programmatic changed the way you sell advertising live environments? And how has that influenced the upfronts for you?
Before I get to the upfronts, I think the biggest change that programmatic has brought to live is what we call this sort of democratization of these premium live events to a longer tail of advertisers, right? So, I think, for companies that aren't like the sort of social companies, there's always been this dream of like of growing your total addressable market, right? And in the TV industry in particular, if you go back decades, it was a relatively smaller market that was sort of confined really to the upfront, right? You had to kind of know a sales rep and do an upfront deal. The automation around live has changed all that in a really significant way. So now we're able to invite advertisers who maybe have never spent on the Olympics or in the NFL before to buy in an automated way using programmatic pipes. So just a couple stats across all of our live event programming, we've seen over close to 120% increase in just the number of advertisers that are in those environments year over year. When we automated the Olympics, which we were the first to ever do, is make the Olympics available programmatically. 90% of the programmatic buyers were new to the Olympics for the first time. So that's great for businesses that hadn't necessarily been able to get into those environments before, but it's also great for us because it allows us to diversify and welcome in new buyers and address our sort of total addressable market. In terms of the upfront, though, yes, it has also affected that market. So our programmatic business is doing really well in the upfronts. We can say that in the 25-26 cycle, we saw about $1 billion of programmatic investment come in. So people are buying into the upfronts, but wanting to activate that programmatically, and that includes in sports. And then with the addition of the NBA this year, we delivered our strongest sports upfront in history, adding over 20% net new clients over last year. So you're seeing new people come in for the sports and also for the access to buy those live sports programmatically.
Ryan, how are you? You mentioned a massive growth. I think the number was 120% of new advertisers coming to buy your inventory and to work with you more closely. How are these advertisers feeling about programmatic in live? Are there any concerns that they have about it being too automated? How have they been receptive to this new format?
So I think they're excited. They're really excited. We have had actually to make sure that in that excitement, they're properly educated, because the technology, the phenomenon behind live sports, as I described earlier, is different than the phenomenon behind VOD. So I think what buyers sometimes think, or maybe traditionally when we started doing live, is like it's a simple lift and shift. So like, maybe I'm buying online short form video on the open web. And so I have a video asset, right? I have a DSP. Let me just point that at the NFL, for example, right? And so there's been a high level of education, I think, started one-on-one with us and the DSPs and our partners, and now it has expanded to the industry, which we can talk a little bit about later, like our work with the IAB Tech Lab, to make sure that people know kind of how to buy live programmatically. So that has involved, a number of things, including we've had to recertify all of our DSP partners for live events specifically. So they may have been certified for programmatic guarantee or PMP and VOD environments, but the concurrencies that happen pose specific challenges that DSPs need to be aware of. Also, the creative ad servers, things like nerdy things like creative pre-ingest, which might make some people roll their eyes.
Yeah, that's nerdy.
Yeah. But like if you're loading a new creative for the first time, it needs to hit our servers and essentially gets transcoded and stored. And in a live event that might only last an hour or two, you don't have a lot of time to go through that transcoding process. And so you want to pre-warm your creatives and make sure that they're essentially loaded into the CDNs and ready to run, so that you don't miss vital time that can pass you by. And then speaking of time, also pacing. I mean, people in their DSPs need to think about pacing in a new way, because you may set your pacing goals over a 30-day or 60-day period, but with these high concurrencies, you could reach lots of people within a 2-hour period, right? And so you need to kind of make sure you're adjusting those things. So those are just a couple different examples, I think, of as you automate live buying, like different ways that you need to think about it. But the other thing I'll say, there was a really good IAB survey that came out, I think, in July, the 2025 Digital Video Ad Spend Strategy Report. And there's some interesting taglines in there that I thought were great. They said, as buyers, marketers, and advertisers see live sports shifting from traditional linear to streaming, they don't want what they call linear light. In other words, don't just take sports that was on TV and put it on streaming, like make it better. And there's a stat in there that 60% of buyers expect more from sports and live content when it's on streaming. So what is that more? I mean, well, one of the big things is automated buying, but it's real-time data. It could be real-time contextual targeting. It could be, more interactive ad innovation. So I think that there's a lot of excitement from advertisers about moving it. There's education that needs to happen, but there's also product features that we want to bring to them that's going to make live sports even more exciting to buy in this new sort of streaming world.
So amazing response, Ryan. Thank you. So what does working with Freewheel look like for you? Like how do they support all of this live strategy when we're talking about the delta between VOD and just the huge amount of audience that is still watching TV live via streaming?
Yeah, I mean, Freewheel, just to be clear, Freewheel is the sort of technology backbone that powers all of this. So Peacock sits on top of the Freewheel ad server and the Freewheel programmatic module. So all of the DSP certifications that we do are powered by the connection between those DSPs and the Freewheel programmatic module. I think Freewheel is a unique ad server in that it was born out of like television and the video business, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense that they've been a leader in this space. But they have done a lot of work in things like predictive scaling, which I can talk about a little bit when we maybe talk about the IB Tech Lab work. But there are these things that we call rogue waves, right? So rogue waves are spikes of traffic that you aren't necessarily expecting. In fact, it's hard to predict. I think there's a stat only about 65% of publishers fail to accurately predict the amount of concurrence they're going to get for a live sporting event. I mean, that kind of makes sense. Like if it goes into overtime or if it's super exciting, you can get a lot more traffic than maybe you were expecting. And so you can experience these rogue waves of massive concurrence that are coming in. And this is not something that traditional ad servers are necessarily well equipped to do. So they built predictive scaling with an integration with Peacock, where we essentially can understand the logins like into the platform and give them essentially a heads up that like traffic is coming, and they can scale up and down their servers to make sure that they're ready to process it. And that allows
revving the engines.
Yeah, that allows the engine to accept all the ads, so you don't risk missing any monetization opportunities.
So what are the biggest challenges of running live ads today? And what major events in your 2026 lineup should advertisers be paying attention to? Because obviously you're on the Advertising Forum. This is an amazing series. A lot of advertisers, a lot of brands and agencies watch this. Tell us, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, right? There's 7,500 hours. So let's do we have 6 hours to go through each one?
And you nailed February. February is super exciting.
Well, February, obviously, Legendary February is sort of the marquee. I don't know that there's been a bigger sporting moment for a television company in recent history anyway. But when people think of sports, I think on NBC, like they think of the NFL, right? They think of the Olympics. Now they will think of the NBA again. But we have the Ryder Cup. We have the Thanksgiving Day Parade. We have the tree lighting at 30 Rock. And we have the World Cup. We have the 4th of July fireworks. All of these things are part of the platform. And that is on top of the other live news and live, entertainment that I mentioned earlier that makes up 70% of the programming. So there are so many opportunities, I think, for advertisers to take advantage of that 20% increased engagement and performance in these live environments across not just like the big sports that everyone is familiar with, but some of these other events that I mentioned. So regardless of like what type of viewer you're looking for, what type of environment you want to be in, I think NBC has and Peacock has a great variety of live opportunities to choose from.
This has been an excellent conversation, Ryan. We really appreciate it. Obviously, there's so much excitement and importance when it comes to live TV. We really appreciate you jumping on with us. Thank you, Freewheel, for this amazing series that we're running. Thank you, NBCU. We appreciate it, Ryan. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.